Commodore, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining me on Go Bold. Can you talk to me about the significance of the Halifax class frigates and what it means to the Navy, the capability that it brings?
Well, the frigate's really a general purpose, especially the Halifax class. It's the foundational part of our Navy. It's the general purpose surface combatant that really allows us the range, the distance, and the capacity to project force, either in defense of Canada at home or abroad. So really, it is the core of what our Navy is when it comes to combat capability.
Awesome. And what type of there's a number of types of capabilities that the frigate brings to the Navy in terms of combat power, kinetic effect. Can you describe some of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Our frigates were built in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s design. They have an anti-surface, subsurface, and anti-air capability, and it's a closer-in anti-air, not an area air defense. Recently in their upgrades, we've also put in some higher-end capability and signals intelligence, command and control in some of them, and they bring with them a very capable helicopter that has ASW and anti-surface capability. So overall, they make a fairly good bubble to project power as it compared to many other frigates in the world, and we're able to do a bit of command and control at sea out of some of our frigates as well to manage several other ships. So like I said, it's a really important building block.
And talk to me about the numbers of ships that the Royal Canadian Navy has in terms of frigates, both on the east and west coast, and you know, what's kind of their endurance and how long can they be out at sea before they need to come back and replenish?
Well, we have 12 Canadian patrol frigates right now, and we have 7 on the east coast and 5 based on the west coast. And we're actually deploying sort of west coast ships have gone east before. East coast ships are going west now to increase presence in the Indo-Asian Pacific region. And so HMCS Montreal will be deploying into the South Pacific region and around Australia as well. So even though they're based on one coast or another, we actually intermix when the requirements is there. For the second half of your question, it all depends how they're going to be operating. So if we want to maximize our endurance and there's not a significant threat in the region where they're operating, one of our frigates can easily do 2 weeks at sea on a diesel engine. They can maintain presence patrol. In storms or where there's a higher threat level, they have to be able to maneuver. And of course, a ship's not going to outmaneuver a missile. It's not going to outmaneuver a torpedo, or I should say, outrun it. However, they have to be able to turn quickly to be able to deal with it, to bring weapons to bear and everything else. And so if you're operating on gas turbines, generally about every 4 or 5 days you want to find out where your tanker is, because as soon as you're down a quarter tank of gas, the captain starts wondering, where's my next fuel stop? There's not a lot of gas stations in the middle of the ocean. So generally I would say every 4 to 5 days, if you're in an operational theater, you're wondering where your fuel's coming from. But even in that situation, they can 7 to 8 days, no problem.
So here we are on December the 5th, 2022, and we are next to HMCS Vancouver, and next to her is HMCS Winnipeg. Tell me about the significance of today.
Well, the importance of today is we're welcoming back a whole bunch of our shipmates that have deployed to the Indo-Asian Pacific for the last 6 months, and so it's a very emotional day as Christmas is coming. The minister's here. We've had all kinds of guest visitors in and around to welcome the ships home. And this is the other half of the departure. And so obviously when you come home, it means you had to leave. Canada maintaining a presence overseas and doing what our government wants means our ships can't stay here. They have to go to wherever they're needed. And in this case, it was participating in part of RIMPAC earlier in the summer, and then carrying on to the Indo-Asian Pacific, working with the Japanese, the Koreans, the New Zealanders, the Australians, visiting Singapore, Malaysia, really making our presence known and understood, and in some parts transiting the Straits of Taiwan to get from one place to another, and working in the South China Sea or off the coast of North Korea to monitor UN sanctions that are in place there. And so during those 6 months, a lot of work, a lot of focus, and today is sort of the release where we welcome back about 500 of our shipmates that have been gone doing the business forward, and we start prepping the ships for their next mission.
How long is a typical turnaround time?
It all depends. So HMCS Winnipeg is going to be doing domestic force generation for the next year or so. And HMCS Vancouver, over the next sort of 6 to 9 months, will be going through maintenance and is scheduled to deploy. Specifics of that deployment are still being worked out, but it'll probably deploy next summer again.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Commodore. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. So, hey everybody, welcome to Go Bold. I'm on board the bridge of HMCS Ottawa, one of Canada's 12 Halifax class surface combatant warships. And I am joined with Commander Sam Patchell, who's been a previous guest in one of the episodes of Go Bold. Commander, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, the previous episodes of Go Bold, we've showed the ship from the outside, from the undersurface, which was kind of a cool opportunity, and we've shown what it takes to get trained up. So we've gone to the simulators, we've gone to damage control. Now we're actually on board this ship, and there's so much here, because not only is this a fighting warship, but it's also people's homes. So there's so many things here that we can't cover in one small series, but this is a warship, and so we have to talk about the kind of combat capability of the Halifax class, specifically HMCS Ottawa that you command. So if we were to talk about the ship and its capabilities and how you would actually fight the ship in a kinetic conflict, how would that all happen?
Well, it's a somewhat broad question, because my first question would be, what's the enemy and where is it coming from? Is it on the surface of the ocean? Is it under the water, or is it coming from the air, or a combination of all three?
Right.
Which is what we train to, is to be able to fight in multiple domains or at the same time. And there's a interconnectedness of the two, because our modern weapons and systems out there, our adversaries have weapons that, for example, a missile that can be launched from an aircraft, from a surface ship, or from a submarine. The final threat is an incoming missile, but the source of that threat could be on land, it could be in the sea, it could be in the air. So it's a fairly complex thing that fighting, and as we work in a more coordinated fashion, so do our adversaries, where it isn't the enemy that's shooting at me is not the one that's looking at me, that somebody else is potentially. So fighting through that and identifying if our multiple units working together to defeat us if we were to get into a kinetic fight. Does that answer your question a bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
it does. And I think contrary to what perhaps Hollywood often portrays, which is typically not accurate, and maybe people's older ideas of what it's like to fight naval battles or fight a Navy ship, people might think you do it from the bridge, where we currently are today, but that's not the case.
It's not the case at all. And the idea of being able to spot your target and engage, other than a small boat where visually identifying the maneuvering, you're engaging with our smaller weapon systems. Most of the enemies you're engaging, if it were in a kinetic fight, is over the horizon, or you can't see the submarine, for example. So you're fighting, and that's why we move down. When we go to action stations, for example, I don't do that from up here. My eyes and ears are my bridge watchkeepers running, usually led by the navigator on the bridge, and then we're fighting the systems down in the operations room as well, because it's as much the communications between units so as it is identifying the target, because there's a target that if a target is identified, that coordination between multiple units to actually, if we are to put weapons on a target, it likely is not in isolation, particularly with warships.
Right. And so run me through a typical scenario. Let's say, and again, it depends on the context, but let's say it's a hostile air target that you're encountering.
Well, so that would be the first indication. We're basically constantly monitoring the airspace around us and working with other units in a theater of operation, monitoring that. And it's when we have indications and warnings, possibly sent through intelligence or through an emitter that we would detect that, or call either another unit in our group that detects that is contrary or outside the normal spectrum. And there's certain things we can identify. It's much like in the airspace world, there's a whole bunch of lanes. And airplanes, as you know, if you're flying from here to, say, Japan, all the planes follow the same route. Well, then if you're under that lane, you would expect most of the aircraft at a certain altitude with a transponder on. Well, if two aircraft come in low, much faster than any commercial air would, those are suspicious activities.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we need to go to action stations that are threatening us. So we would likely reach out to them and try to establish some kind of communication, because there could be all sorts of reasons why they may not be operating as a normal aircraft would in that region. But if there aren't responses and they continue in a threatening profile, or they have emitters that would indicate that this is a potential threat, that's when we would then bring the ship to action stations to defend the ship. Because it's too late to wait till you've been shot at to defend the ship.
Right.
In many cases, so you bring the ship. It's easier to bring the ship to action stations, be ready to defend, and then realize, okay, and then identify, no, this aircraft wasn't a threat, and then we stand down and secure action stations, as opposed to the alternative.
Right.
And to have to defend the ship in the short strokes, where the first indication that there's a threat is there's either a weapon release or a bomb toss or the like. And then you're playing catch up.
Right, right. And so if you're sailing along on a normal, on a typical day, doing whatever evolutions that you're doing, and you go to action stations, typically you would be dressed in like the uniform that you are today.
Exactly. I'm wearing this rig. I'll have a jacket on. We would be putting on. We'd also put on our flash gear. It was learned actually back in the Falkland War, the injuries that are sustained when you take damage from monitors and fires and the flash damage. So protect your hands and face. So we wear a flash hood to just protect ourselves. We prepared ourselves to get into it. If we're in a fight, is to survive and continue the fight. We don't want to, if something leaks through, we take a missile, that we have a whole other organization when we go to action stations to now put out the fires, to stop the flooding, and to continue to keep our weapons fighting and able to re-engage, and also just our own health. So the protection head to toe from flash damage, recognizing we may have injuries, but to then fight around it. And so many of our systems throughout our ship, there's multiple redundancies and pathways in which the electrical signals go from one system to another, so that we can toggle between them. If something was knocked out, there's a second, and that's true of. And you'd expect to see that most warships nowadays. That's how we design them. So there isn't any one single point of failure.
Right, right. Well, it makes total sense. And so throughout the bridge here, you'll see various different pieces of protective gear.
Yes.
That like you're referring to, the flash gear, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and those are the flak jackets, helmets, Kevlar helmets. For those on the bridge that are a higher risk as well, if you're worrying about small boat attacks with small arms, and up here you're still protected, but a 7.62 round, your AK-47 round, if you're out on the wing, it would be lethal. So wearing things like a Kevlar helmet does add that layer of protection. Also, just the shrapnel damage. You may not be near the direct impact of a rocket-propelled grenade or a small arms fire, but the ricochet could still harm you. So that's why we wear the additional protective gear.
Right. For those people that are not familiar with the Navy, most of the weapon systems on board a Halifax class frigate are defensive in nature.
Affirmative, yeah, that's true. We're not as a frigate really. We're designed, and our capabilities are limited to point defense and really self-defense, or self-defense as long as the other units nearby are within basically close enough that we'd likely have to. It's hard to discern whether we're under attack or the ship or the other unit near us is under attack. We do have our harpoon weapon system is much longer range and and can be used as not as a self-defense weapon, and wouldn't consider it a self-defense weapon. Some may argue too, depending on how you look at our torpedoes and the use of the torpedo, if a ship is firing a torpedo, the typical range of torpedoes, if you're firing at a submarine, you're firing in self-defense.
Right. And
that's why, and actually, unfortunately, Ottawa has a helicopter embarked, and so the fighting particularly in the underwater warfare domain, having helicopters, the potency and ability to actually prosecute a submarine is much more capable when you have a helicopter.
Right.
And that actually speaks to what I talked to earlier about how you're fighting in the different domains. For a submarine, surface ships are the target, but it's the aircraft that are the real enemy, and that's what defeats them, because They can move quickly. They can hover in the air and put their sensors right on top of and then no matter how fast, even the fastest submarines, they can't outrun it. So you got your nuclear powered submarines can go 30 knots, so that helicopter can go 4 times that speed. Oh, you're going that way, I'll just reposition. They can lay a bunch of listening devices in the water, and then I don't even need to know which way you're going to go. You're going to drive by one of them, and now you're over there, and that's where the potency that an aircraft has to defeat submarines is great. So
right, and so every frigate, if you deploy, you typically deploy with a helicopter.
Oh yeah, and for a multitude of reasons. The helicopter, one, to fight in the underwater warfare world, is just a force multiplier, but as well building the surface picture. So typically ships can see to about 12 nautical miles on the horizon. There's simple math to figure out. There's the curvature of the Earth. The higher the mast, the further you can see. So, and depending on the type of radar you have, but again, that's only to the surface. Well, all you need is a helicopter go up a couple hundred feet. It's already seen further, and then it goes out. Even if it doesn't go high, but it goes out far, it's now looking even beyond that, and can then relay back. Okay, 100 miles from you is a surface ship that it might be a concern. We also know the exact length of most ships out there. So similarly, when it comes to identifying things, we're not sure it's this, but a tankers typically are, say, a certain length, and then this ship looks much different than that. I might not have a good optics on it, but I can see, well, sure doesn't look like a tanker right now. So that's where a helicopter can tell me long before I'm even near that ship to go, okay, we made it. So heads up, maybe we should not come to action stations just yet, but focus the team looking down that. Do we have other indications? Are they emitting certain frequencies? Most of us have some kind of navigation radar, which every ship in the world tends to have. But there's some more. If you look at Winnipeg ahead of us here, same with Ottawa and all warships, they operate in a whole myriad spectrum of electronic systems that basically transmit into the electronic spectrum, which is not normal from your typical merchant.
Right. So if you now, if you get to the point where a threat is, you're now deeming it, whatever situation you've got, there's a threat. You go to action stations. Is it you as the captain that makes that decision to go to action stations?
Well, yes and no. I've empowered my team. Actually, there's a great scene. Have you seen the movie Master and Commander?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Right? The opening scenes?
Yeah.
The young ensign and the other one who's just looking down just for a sec. He thought he saw something and he isn't sure. And then the other one says, beat a quarters and bring the ship. That's basically bring the ship to action stations.
Right.
So similarly, either in the operations room or up here on the bridge, there may be just a sniff of something that, something's happening. And we don't have time to talk and figure it out and talk it through. Was it this? And start to overthink it. We have a series of, that's a clue that this might be a threat. We'll bring the ship to action station. And I've empowered my watchkeepers and my operations room officers, bring the ship to take action. And this is one thing, it's always like a lot of things. You'll never be faulted for bringing the ship to action stations one too many times. You will be faulted if one not enough. Right? And darn. So we close it, wakes people up, gets people moving. We get our gear in place, and it was and not to say a false alarm, but okay now. So now things are happening. We still got to figure out, is this a real threat or not, until the team is really ready to go and fully defend ourselves. We're immediately, if we're in a high threat environment, instantly the systems are already set up such that urgent reaction, we're ready to go. We'll have the weapon systems and the team dialed in where certain stuff is ready to defend. We have to fight against systems that fire from detection inside 30 seconds from detection to impact. So we need to be able to know, heads up, there's something going. You can bridge the ship. We got 6 minutes. We'll have the ship at action stations. That weapon has already come in, and we've already had to defeat it. So there are already systems in place for that. That's also a clue that we're under attack.
Right.
So that our posture would change. So I'd say that would be where it's not just me that makes the call. I might have all I have is more experience.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right. And people sometimes are reluctant to make the call because they're worried about. Actually, great that again in that movie where I think the kid had struggled, where he was struggling, people were doubting, and he had the right instincts, but he didn't know how to act. So I tried my best to empower that I trusted you. I made the call based on what information you had. If it was the wrong call, hindsight's great. Okay, now we know more, but reacting and bring the ship, getting people moving, so be it if it was a false alarm. I'd rather a false alarm than not react to the real thing.
Absolutely, and that's part of what we've seen over the course of this series, is that all of the training, it's all building blocks, getting to the point where you deploy, and everyone kind of knows when something happens that this is how you react, this is what you need to do.
You think that's definitely where it's the relationship you build. I remember you asked me earlier about how is it that you understand the trust, or how officers know what you want, and it's actually every day working together, building a trust, and when you really get a team working well together, you almost have to say nothing. It's a look. They'll give a report, and there's a look, a tone, a nod, a gesture, and it just takes down the verbology. Maybe not properly recorded, but that you only build that when you work together as a team, and when done well, it's amazing how quiet things get, and the teams, the trying to explain to each other why I've come up. No, I know you got it. I know what you're talking about because I'm right here working with you, and you're briefing me. Go, right. That kind of is very quiet, and it gives actually a lot of space. And it's only when you're working together and it's a new team that hasn't practiced that's when you start to see some struggles. But fortunately, I've been with this team now. I just signed a piece of paper today reminding me I've been here for 38 months. So I've been here a while, which is a long time.
You have, yeah.
So I've got to know this team well, and my job really is just to make them all be a bit better at their jobs. And that's how my hope is that we'll do well. That's my job, and I think they are. So, yeah.
From everything I've seen, Commander, I think that will be the case. You guys just seem to be a very, very fine knit working unit. When you go to action stations,
Right.
You go from here now to the ops room.
Yeah, if I happen to be on the bridge, I'd go from here. But I could easily be in the bathroom, working out in the gym, going for a walk. I like going into the engine room a lot, so I'm always walking about the ship. And if they can't get a hold of me, then we might be. So let's presume that today I happen to be on the bridge and we got the clue that there's something, and then we bring the ship to action stations. At that point, I'd be moving down to ops.
Okay, perfect. So let's go to ops and take a look at what that entails.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you, Pamela. Yeah.
I've got to get you the
Sign something, eh? I took my pen out of my pocket so I wouldn't have it in my shirt.
for minor mods.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go down here.
I need you to sign those.
So we'll just keep going down, and then I got to come back up for a sec, okay?
Sure.
Officer of the day, 203. Officer of the day.
So this is open. Yeah. Are we good to come in?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Come on in.
So we've just arrived in the Ops Center on board HMCS Ottawa, and I'm here with the Commander Patchell again. So Commander, we just came down from the bridge, and if you were at action stations, you'd come into this space.
Exactly. Like I said, we put on some extra protective gear and then making our way in here. I'd move in here. At the time, you'd see a lot more displays up and running. Immediately, my operations room officer, the one running really this entire team, who knows is in the fight, is sitting right there. My first move is just to step in behind him. Okay, where's the threat? And my second glance, actually Grant, I look right where he is, just behind him, there's a heading. I'm looking at my heading, and I'm just looking at that to glance and sort of put him, so I don't know where I just came from. In this case, the bridge, I knew where we were going, but I'd look at where we're headed and where we need to go, and just try to orient myself fairly quickly what's going on around. If it was in the air war, it was something we talked about earlier. If an aircraft came inbound, so that's this gentleman or lady here, in this case, two gentlemen that work on our team, leading a team of men and women on the left side of the ship fighting the surface and air war. And so I'd be focusing more on listening to what they had to say at that moment. As you can see, this is also, and we talked earlier about, this is both our office space and our home. So some of the extra, like the Mr. Bejedo heads on the front and the decorations here are that's sailors
awesome.
Being sailors.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
It doesn't really have a tactical element, but that would be where we'd focus. If it was on the underwater war, that's this team. There'd be a whole team of people here working, operating these systems, and the expert, the one leading that, is there. If it's at the surface world, again, partly there, but also here in the front row, as they base it, they're really managing all the radar information that's coming in. And I guess simply, it's a bunch of data fusion that comes together to one position here. That person then, as much as the computers are great, they do a lot of calculations and figure things out. By the end of the day, it takes a human to to crunch it all and realize, yeah, that's right or that's wrong, sort through that, and then put it into that is an enemy or that is a friendly target, and so forth. So.
Right. So underwater is kind of that part of the ops room. Air.
So really, surface and air. The weapon systems is here. The plotting of aircraft, surface ships, subsurface ships. That's the easy way to look at it.
Okay.
So kind of from those in the air, the overall picture, and those underwater, and then all the tactics and the other specialized equipment to fighting that work here. So that's kind of how we've divided. Most ships out there, that's how you co-locate the people working in the same, fighting the same domain.
Right. And so you have a number of kinetic weapons that are available, as we mentioned, primarily for defensive purposes. You have evolved Sea Sparrow missiles.
Yep.
And those are surface to air.
Yes.
You've got torpedoes, as you mentioned. You have the Harpoon anti-ship missile.
Yep.
And then you have the main gun. Primarily, those are the
the main gun, which can fire to surface targets or air targets. As well, we have a close-in weapon system. It's the system aft that looks like a R2-D2 with a Gatling gun on it.
Right.
And that's really, and that's a last point defense system. As well, we have some, because of advanced weaponry, we also work with a bunch of systems that don't go for hard kill but soft kill, and to seduce and distract the weapons with active seeker heads from hitting us and working together.
Right. And I guess the final kind of, little point defense weaponry is some of the remote weapon stations that you have around the ship.
So if we came in close, we do also have 5 50 caliber mounts that are remotely controlled from down inside the ship, and those are, it does two things. One, protects the operator so they're no longer exposed on the upper decks, and two, being gyroscopically stabilized and remotely controlled, there's a handoff ability between them, so as a target maneuvers or the ship maneuvers, the operator can transfer from one weapon to the other and continuously fire if required, just because so that the firing arc of each weapon is then covered and the person doesn't lose control.
Well, Commander Patchell, I can't thank you enough for explaining how you would fight a Halifax-class warship, and also for allowing us to come into this space. It's a very rare opportunity, and I don't think many get. So I want to just thank you so much for...
You're welcome, Jody.
For taking the time.
Cheers.
Great to see you. Thank you. Hey everybody, I am on board the forecastle of HMCS Ottawa, one of Canada's 12 Halifax-class frigates, and I'm joined by Lieutenant Graham Stout. Graham, thank you so much for joining me on Go Bold.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Jody. I really appreciate it.
It's wonderful to have you on this episode. Thank you. Graham, tell me a little bit about your position aboard.
So on board HMCS Ottawa, I am the Combat Systems Engineering Officer, Assistant Head of Department. So what does that mean? My department is responsible for the maintenance of all the weapons and sensors on board this frigate. So we are stocked with technicians. Those technicians perform all the maintenance and all the repairs so that when the operators need to use these weapons and sensors, they operate as expected. So my boss on board is the head of department, so he is ultimately responsible for the entire department. I am currently training right now. I'm the assistant head of department, preparing for my next tour where I will be the one in charge.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, for this particular episode, we had the opportunity to speak with your commanding officer, Commander Sam Patchell, and he described to us what it takes or what happens when a ship comes to action stations. And if you happen to get into a kinetic fight, he described some of the weapons that are aboard. And so you and your department or the people in your department are instrumental in keeping these things working properly.
Yeah, that's correct.
The way they're advertised. So how about we walk through the weapons from fore to aft, and you can just describe to me as we go what each one does and kind of a little bit about each one, if that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that.
Awesome. So let's start with this one, the most obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, behind us here we have our 57 millimeter Bofors main gun armament. This is going to be used for both offensive and defensive capabilities against surface and air threats. So primarily, we're going to employ it in a defensive capability against incoming missiles or other projectiles, but it can also be used offensively against surface targets as a deterrent for them closing our position. And this gun is fed in from all these sensors that you can see above here on the mast. As is probably very obvious, a human trying to aim this gun at the right point in space quickly enough to intercept a threat is borderline impossible at this level of technology in this day of age. So this gun relies on all that information being fed in so it can point at the right spot and hit the target at the right time.
Wow. Very, very cool. I see another one further in the back. Let's go take a look at
Yeah,
that
let's
one.
go over here. So yeah, as you can see up on the bridge wing there, that's our naval remote weapon system. It's an upgrade of our standard 50 caliber mount. So that gun right there, 50 caliber, and what we've done is we've basically turned everything from a manual sailor standing out there firing the gun out in the elements, and we've made it all electrical and electronic. So now the operator sits in the safety of the ship and is able to actuate that through a joystick and a screen. And we've been trialing it in the past couple months, and we found the accuracy has actually increased quite a bit. So it's a great upgrade to the fleet, and we've been able to use it with quite an amount of success. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to operate when we go on deployment, and how it's going to hold up in the threat areas across the Pacific.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of evolution of that weapon, because before you would have to have people out there operating it, and that puts them at risk. And so now it's remotely operated. You can be in the safety of being inside the ship while operating that.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, also the person standing out there would have to have communications on. It's really loud and everything like that. Now, inside the ship, almost no noise at all. Like, the communication's better, everything's better. I'm really happy with this upgrade to the system.
Beautiful. Well, let's continue on back.
Yes, please.
And we'll go to the next weapon.
Just watch your foot there. Would you like port or starboard, whichever the light is better?
How about we stay on this side?
Yeah,
and just
totally.
work our way back.
All right, so just behind me here, we have our Evolved Sea Sparrow missile. These are primarily our self-defense missiles on board. So we're going to employ them when we have an incoming missile threat or an incoming aircraft, and we're going to launch these out to intercept it. As with the 57 millimeter up front, these missiles will be getting their information from the various sensors on board, and we'll be feeding that target information in so we can be sure that this missile is going to get to the right spot and impact the target at the right time.
Right, and there's 8 missiles on this side of the ship and an equal number on the opposite side.
That is correct.
Right.
And yeah, you can see we have the missile canister itself, and then we have the exhaust tube, because when that thing launches, it's going to put a lot of material out the bottom of it.
Right on. Excellent. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll go on to the next.
Moving on. I'm not sure what the best angle. Are you able to see it here? Okay, perfect. Just behind me here, we have our Harpoon missiles. So these are our over-the-horizon surface-to-surface missiles. So we're going to employ these in a primarily offensive capability against hostile targets, whether they be on the ocean or on the shore.
Right, and so this particular missile is, in essence, an anti-ship missile.
That is correct, yes.
Right.
And yeah, this is very standard offensive missile. Many navies across the world carry the Harpoon missile for offensive capabilities.
And so 4 on this side of the ship and 4 on the other side.
That is correct. And you can see the orientation of the missiles here. So these missiles are going to fire that way and go out the other side of the ship.
The opposite side.
Yeah, that's correct.
From what they're loaded. Excellent. Okay.
Perfect.
And we'll go on to the next one.
Moving on back. So you can see right here, coming off the side of the ship, we have 2 torpedo tubes. So Halifax class frigates carry a complement of torpedoes on board. The ship itself primarily uses these in a defensive capability. So if we have any subsurface threats that are getting too close to us, we're going to utilize these torpedoes to engage them directly, or at least put something into the water to make them think twice about coming closer to us.
Right.
So 2 tubes here on the starboard side, and there's also 2 over on, 2 here on the port side and 2 over there on the starboard side.
On the starboard side. Excellent. Awesome. And I guess we'll just continue on.
Yeah, let's
right
continue
to the
on
back.
back.
Yeah.
So yeah, now we find ourselves out here on the flight deck. So currently our Halifax class frigates employ the Cyclone helicopter. So that's gonna sit in the hangar here, and then it's gonna traverse out here onto the flight deck to take off and land. One of the big capabilities we have with our Cyclone helicopters is the ability to employ our torpedoes. So that turns our primarily defensive capability into a more offensive capability, because now we can load those torpedoes up onto the helicopter can fly out over the horizon, and if we're lucky, can drop those torpedoes directly down on top of their target.
Right.
And that way we're able to project force a little bit further and keep those forces far away from the ship, that we're not putting ourselves in danger. So that, I mean, that's a way that we're really integrating both maritime and air together to make a more complete package.
Right. And at the very stern of the ship, there are some more of the remote weapon stations?
That is correct. So you can see there, they're just covered in covers right now to protect them from the elements, but we have 2 more back here. So we had 1 on each bridge wing up front, and then we have 1 on each quarter deck back here. So that's the exact same naval remote weapon system. It's going to be operated by the same people. They're all going to sit together down in the station control room, for lack of a better word. And yeah, going to actuate them. And so now we're sort of spreading our arcs of fire, right? So we have up at the front covered off, and now we have back here at the stern covered off, and we're getting more of a complete envelope of protecting the ship.
Right. And the only other thing that the commanding officer spoke to were some of the decoys that are also available to the ship. They are not kinetic weapons, but they are helpful in fighting the ship.
That is correct.
Are you able to speak a little bit about those, like in terms of like just generally what they do?
Sure, I'd love to. So yeah, on board we have our air launch decoys. So the thing you have to understand about missiles is missiles in general aren't really looking for IR energy. It's not like your eyeball. They're looking for radar cross section. So they're going to put out some RF energy and they're going to get a receive back. When they put out a radio signal and it hits our ship and reflects back, that's going to have, it's basically going to tell the missile that's exactly where HMCS Ottawa is. So what these chaff systems do is they're going to put up a whole bunch of material into the air, and basically if the missile is trying to look for us, they're going to focus on the biggest thing that they can see. If the biggest thing that they can see is a big ball of chaff, they're going to go for that and not go for us. So those systems are like really going to protect us, especially when we have forces coming in really close. And yeah, they like certainly cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, very important. And it's kind of a good way to segue to the last weapon system, which those that know might think we've forgotten, but it actually speaks to what we just spoke about, the chaff, and hopefully enemy missiles will go towards that. But in case they don't, there's a last point of defense, and that's the weapon system up top.
Yeah, so we have our phalanx close-in weapon system, colloquially known as the CWIS. So yes, this is our last line of defense against incoming threats. Basically, the point of the CWIS is to put as much lead between us and the threat as possible. If you've ever seen any of these in action, very loud, very fast, basically universally used across many navies across the world. But yeah, primarily for air targets, can be utilized against surface targets, but I mean, mostly we're just going to let the CWIS pick up its target and do its thing.
Right, and it does it automatically, right?
That's correct, yes. So the CWIS, you can see the radome up there. It has its own sensors that it's going to be going off of. The CWIS will 100% do its own thing and take care of itself, and by extension, it's going to take care of us.
Awesome. Well, Lieutenant Stout, thank you so much for giving us a tour of the weapon systems on board HMCS Ottawa. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Hey, thank you very much, Jody. Really happy to do it, and yeah, you're welcome back on board HMCS Ottawa anytime.
Thank you, sir,
You're so
and
very welcome.
I wish you all the best of luck on your upcoming deployment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.